Okay, this is part two, section one of Mental Health Through Will Training by Abraham A. Lowe. The will says yes or no. Claire, on the Saturday panel, recounted how several weeks ago her husband told her he had to leave town for a number of days. She knew it was a business trip which could not be postponed. Nevertheless, she was thrown into a panic at the prospect of being left alone. She felt a heat wave sweeping over her body. Her throat choked. Her heart raced, and the entire body felt limp. She was tense and dizzy and weak. She said nothing and could hardly have said anything because she was terror-stricken. But her husband noticed and the disturbed feelings and upbraided her for being selfish and inconsiderate. In the course of the panel discussion, she stated that her husband obviously didn't care how I felt. Later, she added that she was able to stop her feelings by applying her recovery training. She spotted the panic as an instance of temper and self-pity, hence as sabotage. The spotting produced instant relaxation. I was surprised, she said, that I was able to control my feelings as quickly as I did. I think I'm learning how to handle my feelings. Claire became terrified at the thought of her husband leaving town. Terror meant to her that her feelings were disturbed. Disturbed feelings were noticed by the husband, who upbraided her, presumably for failing to control her feelings. That suggested to Claire that her feelings were not properly appreciated. Recovering her composure, she was surprised to find that control of her feelings was easy, and in the end she concluded that her recovery training had saved her well in the matter of handling her feelings. After listening to this report of an incident in which feelings fairly leaped over one another, I must confess that the dexterity with which Claire manipulated feelings is surprising indeed. And I shall ask, did Claire deal with feelings, or did she play on something which she merely called by that name? What happened to Claire was that she suffered a scare. Previous to the scare, she was reasonably calm. Being calm, her condition was that of relaxation. Her thoughts were relaxed. They were focused on the little household cares of cooking and shopping, or they reviewed the trivial happenings of the preceding day, or dwelt on the funny dreams she had the night before. There was no stewing over issues, no worry about problems, no conflict of ideas, no confusion of plans. The feelings were in the same state of relaxation, and she experienced neither fear nor anger, nor excessive joy, nor immoderate grief. The relaxed thoughts produced a serene spirit. The relaxed feelings gave rise to a mood of comfort. Whenever a person is serene and comfortable, his inner organs tend placidly and peacefully to their functions of circulating, respiration, digestion, and elimination. Hence, no violent sensations, no choking, no air hunger, no nausea. We may say that when Claire was serene and comfortable, her sensations were just as relaxed as were her thoughts and feelings. With no disturbance rocking the body, there was no occasion for the impulses to become turbulent and impetuous, so that the total of her experience, thoughts, feelings, sensations, and impulses, was that of calm, resting composure. We conclude that prior to being struck with terror, Claire's total experience was that of security, producing a state of relaxation. I want you to understand what is meant by the word total experience. Our body has only two ways of experiencing a situation. No matter what is the nature of the situation, it is approached either with a sense of security or one of insecurity. If your attitude happens to be that of security, your entire body will partake of that experience. Your thoughts, feelings, sensations, impulses, your inner organs, outer muscles, skin, even the tiniest fibers and the most particles of tissues will share in the total experience of security, which now governs your body. Experiencing security, they will all be largely devoid of strain, tenseness, commotion, and excitement. Bearing certain organic diseases, no human experience is possible, even thinkable, in which thoughts express security and impulse as restless and erratic. Nor is it feasible that at one and the same time feelings should be relaxed and sensations disturbed and muscles taut. The just prevailing sense of security may be mild or exalted. The experience of, of insecurity may be moderate or severe. But whatever may be its degree or intensity, the entire body is affected. It's a total experience. The total has parts, and the total experience has its parts experiences. I have mentioned them already. They are thoughts, feelings, sensations, and impulses. These are the dominant parts of the total experience. If any of them become disturbed, the disturbances will spread to the other members of the team. If any of them is pacified, the entire team will regain calm and peace, and the disturbances will be stopped. This calming and stopping of disturbances is what is generally referred to as control of disturbances. You will now understand that if you wish to control the total experience of insecurity, you must use a method which will control, that is, stop and calm any one of the dominant parts of that experience. Control one dominant part, for instance, the confused thoughts, and the rest of the team feelings, sensations, and impulses will follow suit. The dominant part which Claire chose to control was her feeling of terror and despair. She claims that after this feeling was calmed and stopped, the sensations, thoughts, and impulses quieted down and she relaxed. But I shall ask, how can feelings be stopped, calmed, and controlled? Which method did Claire use for controlling them? Feelings are spontaneous, they rise and fall and run their course, and no deliberate effort will ever put a halt to their spontaneous progression. Obviously, Claire did not control her feelings, but some other dominant part of her total experience of insecurity. Excuse me. That feelings that feelings and sensations cannot be stopped, calmed, or controlled by deliberate effort ought to be familiar to you because I have emphasized the fact on numerous occasions. I told you repeatedly that thoughts and impulses alone are subject to control. Evidently, when Claire applied her recovery training, she applied it to thoughts and impulses, not her feelings or sensations. I shall repeat, two inner experiences only are subject to control, thoughts and impulses. I shall add that one factor only is capable of controlling them, the will. The inference is that when Claire put a check to her total experience of insecurity, the feat was accomplished through the intervention of her will. It was her will which exercised control over her thoughts, perhaps also over her impulses, perhaps over both. Emphatically, it did not. It did not and could not control her feelings and sensations. You remember I mentioned frequently that the will has one function only. It rejects or accepts ideas and stops or releases impulses. In either case, it says yes or no to the idea or the impulse. Suppose an idea lodges itself in the brain suggesting danger. It is then for the will to judge and decide whether or not danger exists. If the will accepts yes to the idea of danger, then that thought of danger will mobilize feelings of insecurity and will release in their wake rebellious sensations and vehement impulses. The total experience will then be that of insecurity. Conversely, if the will decrees that no danger threatens, the thought of insecurity will be discontinued and feelings, sensations, and impulses will retain their customary equilibrium. You will understand now that ideas rising in the mind offer suggestions to which the will replies with yes or no. This has been called the denying and affirming function of the will. The same function may be exercised by the will in response to impulses, releasing them with a yes and restraining them with a no. How is it that this process of denying and affirming can be used for thoughts and impulses only and not for feelings and sensations? You will grasp that readily if you will consider that precisely the words yes and no what precisely the words yes and no mean when employed in connection with the inner experience. When the will disposes of the thought of danger by rendering the verdict no, Denial can be expressed as saying, "No, there's no truth to this suggestion of danger." Perhaps there is not even a probability or possibility of it. Similarly, when an impulse presses for action and the will interposes its veto, it says in essence, "No, this impulse is undesirable, and its action will prove unwise and harmful." No such ratings in no such ratings in terms of truth and falseness, desirability and harmfulness, wisdom or folly are possible in the instance of feelings and sensations. If a person is seized with grief or stimulated by joy, it would be senseless for the will to claim that joy is false or the grief is impossible. Feelings are either experienced or not experienced. Their existence, wisdom, and probability cannot be denied or affirmed. The same holds for sensations. If the head aches, it would be absurd for the will to object, "No, this is no headache. It is unwise and untrue or improbable." Clearly, if the will is to intervene in order to control the total experience of insecurity, its no cannot be directed to feelings or sensations. Instead, it must address itself to thoughts and impulses. We can now sum up our analysis of Claire's reaction. When her husband announced his planned trip, the idea of danger leaped into Claire's brain. The thought of danger mobilized feelings of insecurity, threw sensations into a violent uproar, and released a host of turbulent impulses to cry out in despair or shout in anger, to argue, protest, or run. When this happened, Claire's will was inactive, and the thought of insecurity was accepted. The result was that the body was thrown into a total experience of insecurity. Suddenly, she remembered her recovery training and presumably recalled the recovery motto that sensations are distressing but not dangerous. Now the thought of no danger dominated her brain, and she decided to ignore or deny the existence of danger. Her will had been altered and said no. The no calmed her thought processes, and the calm communicated itself to sensations, feelings, and impulses. The total experience was now one of security. When Claire noticed that her body had relaxed so miraculously, she felt the need for explaining the miracle, and in doing so, she employed the clumsy and incorrect language of the man on the street. According to this language, feelings are subject to control. Had she used the recovery language, she would have surmised that her total experience of insecurity had been remedied by the intervention of will, which said no to the idea of danger, with the result of one dominant part of the experience was brought under control and spread to the effect of the other parts. Claire had done the right thing trying to explain it, but called it by the wrong name. Thank you for listening. That was section 2, part 1 of Mental Health Through Will Training by Abraham Lowe. See you again soon. Thank you.